What happens when a Hollywood powerhouse, known for championing women's voices, sits across the table from one of the most outspoken conservative co-hosts on daytime television? And the conversation takes a turn nobody in the studio expects. Make sure to subscribe to the Star Talks and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The cameras are already rolling. The audience is warm, clapping as Reese Witherspoon walks out with that familiar bright smile. She hugs the hosts one by one, laughs lightly at a quick joke from Whoopi, and settles into her seat at the table. Whoopi leans forward. "Reese, first of all, welcome back. It's been a minute." Reese smiles. "It has. I've missed you guys. It's always lively here." The audience laughs knowingly. Sunny jumps in. "That's one word for it." Alyssa Farah Griffin smiles politely but sits upright, hands folded. She's watching carefully. Whoopi starts with the usual. "You've built this incredible production company. You're telling stories about women that, frankly, Hollywood wasn't telling before. What made you decide to take control like that?" Reese nods. "Honestly, I got tired of reading scripts where the woman was just the girlfriend, or the wife, or the side character. I thought, why aren't we telling complex stories about women who are ambitious, flawed, powerful?" Applause from the audience. Joy chimes in. "Because men were running everything." More applause. A few cheers. Reese laughs but doesn't fully lean into it. "Well, let's just say the industry had a very specific lens for a long time." Alyssa tilts her head slightly. "But don't you think things have changed a lot? I mean, we've seen massive progress in the last decade." Reese nods carefully. "Progress, yes. Equal footing? Not quite. There's a subtle shift in the room. It's small but noticeable." Alyssa leans in. "But here's where I sometimes struggle with this narrative. Hollywood is one of the most progressive industries in the country. Women are leading major franchises, running studios. At some point, does continuing to frame it as an uphill battle ignore how much success there already is?" The audience murmurs. It's not hostile, just alert. Reese keeps her tone calm. "I don't think acknowledging success cancels out systemic issues." Sunny immediately nods. "Exactly." Alyssa raises her hand slightly. "I'm not saying cancel. I'm saying sometimes the message sounds like, nothing's changed. And I think that turns people off who actually want to support women, but feel like they're being told they're part of the problem no matter what." Reese pauses. She's still smiling, but it's tighter now. "That's interesting, because when women speak about inequity, the response is often that we're being dramatic. But when we stay quiet, nothing moves." Audience applause builds. Whoopi steps in gently. "Let's not get too far down the..." But Reese continues, still polite. "It's not about blaming individuals. It's about examining structures." Alyssa responds quickly. "But structures are made up of individuals. So at some point, accountability becomes personal." The audience reacts, some clapping, some murmuring. Joy leans toward Alyssa. "So what are you saying? That Reese shouldn't call out inequity because it makes people uncomfortable?" Alyssa shakes her head. "No, I'm saying tone matters. Messaging matters. If the message becomes the system is rigged and everyone in it is complicit, you lose moderate people who might otherwise agree." Reese straightens slightly in her chair. "With respect, I don't tailor my advocacy to make people comfortable. I tailor it to make change." That lands. The audience claps louder this time. Alyssa's smile tightens just a bit. But change requires persuasion, and persuasion requires meeting people where they are. Sunny jumps in. "Women have been meeting people where they are for centuries." Applause. Whoopi lifts her hands. Okay, let's breathe." Reese laughs softly, but her voice is firmer now. "Look, I'm not trying to alienate anyone. But when I talk about pay gaps or representation gaps, those are measurable realities. That's not rhetoric. That's data." Alyssa nods. "Sure. But some of those gaps vary by industry, by role, by hours worked." Reese interrupts for the first time. "And some of them exist because leadership roles were historically denied to women." The audience reacts loudly. "A few, that's right," calls from the crowd. There's a noticeable tension now. It's not explosive. It's layered. The kind that builds. Whoopi glances between them. "We love a spirited conversation, but let's remember." Alyssa leans forward slightly. "I just think sometimes the framing suggests women are powerless. And I look at you, Reese. You're incredibly powerful. You run companies. You influence culture. Isn't that proof that the system, while imperfect, allows opportunity?" Reese doesn't hesitate. "My success doesn't erase barriers for others." That line gets a strong reaction. Joy nods emphatically. There it is. Alyssa replies, calm but sharper now. But when you're one of the most influential people in the room, continuing to describe yourself as navigating oppression can feel disconnected from everyday Americans who are struggling in different ways. The audience goes quiet for a second. Reese's expression changes. Less smile. More focus. I've never described myself as oppressed. I've described an industry that historically limited women's voices. Alyssa counters, but language matters. When celebrities frame conversations in absolutes, it shapes cultural perception. Sunny interjects. So what's the alternative? Silence. Alyssa shakes her head. No. Balance. Reese inhales slowly. Balance often becomes another word for dilution. The audience reacts again, half applause, half murmurs. Whoopi looks at the camera briefly, that classic daytime TV glance that says this is getting real. Reese continues, more personal now. When I started my company, executives told me female-led stories didn't travel internationally. That was the excuse. That was the reasoning. And it wasn't based on data, it was based on bias. A few gasps from the audience. Alyssa responds carefully. That's wrong. Absolutely. But is that the norm today? Reese looks directly at her. It's still said, just phrased differently. There's a pause. It's heavy but controlled. Joy mutters, mic drop. Alyssa exhales softly. I just worry that when we talk about industries as fundamentally broken, we discourage young women from even trying. Reese responds immediately. No, we prepare them. The audience claps again. Whoopi steps in firmly now. All right, let's do this. We're going to take a quick break, because clearly this conversation is not over. The camera pulls back slightly as the audience buzzes. Some are leaning forward, whispering to each other. The energy is charged, but not chaotic. As the music starts to play, Reese and Alyssa exchange a brief, quiet sentence off mic. It's not heated, but it's intense. Focused. Serious. And you can feel it. This wasn't planned. This wasn't promotional small talk. This is the kind of live television moment where two very different worldviews meet. Politely, firmly, and without backing down. And when they come back from break, the temperature in that studio is going to rise. Stay tuned. The show comes back from commercial, and the energy in the studio is different. The applause is loud, but there's a noticeable buzz underneath it. People are leaning forward in their seats. They know this isn't just a promo interview anymore. Whoopi smiles at the camera. Welcome back. We're here with Reese Witherspoon, and we're having what I would call a very real conversation. The audience laughs lightly. Reese nods, composed but clearly still in it. Alyssa sits upright, hands clasped on the table, prepared. Whoopi turns slightly. Before we went to break, we were talking about representation, opportunity, and whether framing an industry as flawed discourages or empowers people. Reese, you were saying you believe it prepares women. Reese nods. It does. Because pretending obstacles don't exist doesn't make them disappear. It just means you're blindsided when you hit them. Applause. Alyssa jumps in gently. But there's a difference between acknowledging obstacles and suggesting the entire system is stacked beyond repair. Reese responds quickly, but not angrily. I didn't say beyond repair. I said it needs accountability. Sunny nods. That's fair. Alyssa keeps her tone calm. Accountability is fair. But sometimes the messaging from Hollywood feels like it paints the country as inherently sexist. And that alienates people who don't see themselves that way. There's a murmur from the audience. Reese leans forward slightly. If someone feels personally accused when systemic bias is discussed, maybe that's worth examining. A few loud oohs ripple through the crowd. Whoopi lifts her eyebrows. Okay, Alyssa doesn't flinch. Or maybe it's worth examining whether broad generalizations are productive. Joy cuts in. Nobody said all men or all people. Alyssa responds, still steady. Not explicitly. But culturally, that's how it's sometimes interpreted. Reese takes a breath. Interpretation can't dictate whether we speak truthfully. Audience applause. Alyssa turns slightly toward Reese. But tone can influence whether people listen. And I think that matters. Reese nods slowly. I agree tone matters. But I also think women are constantly asked to soften their tone to be more palatable. The audience claps loudly at that. Sunny smiles. That's real. Alyssa responds immediately. I'm not asking you to soften. I'm asking whether constantly framing issues as systemic injustice creates division rather than unity. Reese looks at her directly. Unity built on silence isn't unity. The crowd reacts again, louder this time. Whoopi steps in. Let's dial this back a bit. Nobody here is saying stay silent. Reese nods toward Whoopi. Exactly. But there's a pattern. When women advocate strongly, we're told we're divisive. When we're gentle, we're ignored. Alyssa responds, slightly more animated now. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying when public figures with massive platforms frame conversations in absolutes, it can reinforce a narrative that everything is broken. And I don't think that reflects reality for most Americans. Reese tilts her head. Most Americans? Or most Americans you talk to? The audience gasps softly. Alyssa smiles tightly. I talk to a lot of Americans across the political spectrum. Joy jumps in. Well, so do we. Alyssa keeps her composure. And many women feel empowered. They feel opportunity. They don't feel oppressed. Reese answers calmly. Empowerment and inequity can coexist. That lands heavily. Sunny nods. Yes. Alyssa continues, slightly firmer. But when celebrities talk about America as if it's fundamentally unjust, that messaging goes beyond industry critique. It becomes political. Reese doesn't back down. Everything is political when it affects power and money. The audience erupts in applause again. Whoopi leans back. Well, that's not entirely wrong. Alyssa lets out a small laugh. See, that's exactly my point. When everything becomes political, there's no common ground left. Reese responds quickly. Common ground doesn't mean avoiding uncomfortable conversations. Alyssa counters, but if every conversation starts with the assumption that institutions are oppressive, it shuts down nuance. Reese's voice is still controlled, but more direct now. Calling out inequity is not the same as condemning every individual inside the system. Alyssa replies, but public rhetoric doesn't always make that distinction. Sunny leans forward. So what's the solution? Say less. Alyssa shakes her head. Say it in a way that invites dialogue instead of framing disagreement as moral failure. There's a pause. Reese looks thoughtful for a second. I don't believe I've framed disagreement as moral failure. Alyssa responds, when you say if someone feels uncomfortable, they should examine themselves. That can come across that way. The audience murmurs again. Reese exhales slowly. Self-examination isn't condemnation. It's growth. That line earns applause. Whoopi interjects again. Okay, I want to ask something practical. Reese, when you're producing a project, are you actively looking to hire differently? To change structures from inside? Reese nods. Absolutely. We track data. We look at hiring patterns. We look at pay equity. We make intentional decisions. Alyssa asks, do you believe most studios aren't doing that? Reese answers honestly. Some are. Some aren't. That's why the conversation continues. Alyssa leans back slightly. So then it's evolving. Reese nods. It is. But evolution requires pressure. The audience claps again. Joy laughs. You don't get change without a little heat. Alyssa responds calmly, but with an edge. Heat can also burn bridges. Reese meets her gaze. Some bridges need rebuilding. The room goes quiet for a split second before applause breaks out again. Whoopi holds up her hands. All right. I see we're not running out of things to say. The audience laughs. But the tension hasn't disappeared. It's matured. It's sharper now. More personal. Alyssa turns slightly toward Reese again. Can I ask you something directly? Reese nods. Of course. Alyssa continues, voice steady. Do you believe women in America today are systematically oppressed? The audience goes very quiet. Reese doesn't answer immediately. She thinks. I believe there are systemic barriers that disproportionately affect women. Yes. Alyssa follows up quickly. Across the board, Reese clarifies. In specific areas, pay, leadership representation, access to capital. Alyssa nods. But would you say America is one of the best places in the world to be a woman? There it is. The question shifts the frame. The audience murmurs again. Reese answers carefully. Comparative advantage doesn't negate existing issues. Some applause. Some silence. Alyssa presses slightly. So that's not a yes. Reese looks at her. It's a nuanced yes. The audience laughs nervously. Sunny interjects. Why is it either or? Alyssa responds, because framing matters. If we constantly highlight flaws without acknowledging progress, people lose perspective. Reese's voice is calm but firm. I acknowledge progress. I'm living proof of it. But I won't pretend the work is done. The audience claps again. Whoopi glances at the clock. We've got time for one more question before the next break. But the energy suggests this conversation is far from finished. And you can feel it building, not explosive, not chaotic, but layered, ideological, and personal. Because now it's not just about Hollywood. It's about how you talk about America itself. And that's when daytime TV stops being light and starts being real. When the show returns again, the applause is slightly louder than usual. Not because the mood is lighter, but because the audience can feel they're witnessing something unscripted. The smiles at the table are thinner now. Professional, but tight. Whoopi leans in first. All right, we're back. And I'm going to say this. I appreciate that we can sit at this table and disagree without flipping it over. The audience laughs, a bit of tension released. Reese smiles faintly. I'm not flipping anything. Alyssa smiles too. Same. But both of them sit a little straighter. Whoopi turns to Reese. You said before the break that acknowledging progress doesn't mean the work is done. Let's stay there. What specifically do you think still needs to change? Reese doesn't hesitate. Access to funding. Venture capital for female founders is still disproportionately low. Women-led films still receive smaller marketing budgets on average. And when projects fail, they're treated as proof that female-led content doesn't sell, whereas male-led failures are treated as one-offs. The audience claps. Alyssa nods. Okay, but some would argue that studios respond to profit margins, not gender. Reese responds calmly. And profit margins are influenced by where you invest your marketing dollars. A few people in the audience murmur in agreement. Alyssa continues, still measured. But that assumes intention. That assumes bias rather than business calculus. Reese tilts her head. Bias can shape business calculus. That line lands. Applause again. Sunny leans in. Exactly. Alyssa glances at Sunny, then back at Reese. But here's my concern. When we attribute disparities primarily to bias, we risk dismissing other variables, genre, audience demand, international markets. Reese responds quickly. Those variables are often cited selectively. The audience reacts with a low MMM. Alyssa's tone firms slightly. But do you see how that sounds? It implies bad faith. Reese pauses. No, it implies patterns. Joy jumps in. Patterns don't lie. Alyssa turns toward Joy briefly. Patterns can be interpreted in different ways. Whoopi lifts a hand. Let's not spiral. But Reese continues, voice steady. When I pitched certain projects, I was told they were too niche. Those same themes later succeeded when rebranded differently. That's not coincidence. Alyssa responds, or it's timing. Markets shift. Reese meets her gaze. Timing shifts when someone is willing to take a risk. The audience claps again, louder this time. Alyssa leans forward now, no longer just defending abstract ideas. I don't disagree that risk-taking matters. But I also think there's a growing narrative that if outcomes aren't equal, discrimination must be the primary cause. And that oversimplifies complex systems. There's a noticeable pause after that. Reese answers carefully. No serious person thinks there's one cause. But dismissing discrimination as secondary or rare is equally simplistic. Sunny nods firmly. Yes. Alyssa exhales slowly. I'm not dismissing it. I'm questioning whether the rhetoric sometimes amplifies it in a way that makes compromise impossible. Reese's voice lowers slightly, not louder, but more intense. Compromise on what? Equal opportunity. The audience reacts audibly. Alyssa shakes her head. No. Compromise on tone. On framing. On how we talk about institutions. Reese responds. Institutions are powerful. They can handle scrutiny. Alyssa counters. But constant scrutiny without acknowledgement of improvement creates cynicism. Reese replies immediately. Cynicism comes from unmet expectations. That earns another wave of applause. Whoopi looks between them. Okay, I'm going to ask something blunt. Alyssa, do you feel like Hollywood activism has gone too far? The audience leans in. Alyssa thinks for a moment. I think Hollywood activism sometimes speaks in absolutes that don't reflect the lived experiences of many Americans. And when people feel unseen in that conversation, they tune out. Reese responds without missing a beat. And many women felt unseen for decades. The audience claps loudly. Alyssa nods. That's valid. But are we replacing one imbalance with another? Reese's expression sharpens slightly. Equality is an imbalance. Alyssa clarifies. But cultural dominance by any one ideology can feel exclusionary. Sunny jumps in. So advocating for gender equity is ideological dominance? Alyssa replies calmly, no. framing dissent as regressive can be. Reese leans back slightly, then forward again. I don't think questioning systemic inequity is ideological extremism. Alyssa answers, and I don't think asking for balanced rhetoric is opposition to equality. There's a moment of silence at the table. Not awkward, just heavy. Joy breaks it. This is why this show works. Laughter ripples through the audience, but it's nervous. Whoopi turns to Reese. Has there been backlash? Personally, Reese nods slowly. Of course. When you speak about pay equity or representation, there are always people who say you're exaggerating, or that you're ungrateful. Alyssa interjects gently. Do you think some of that pushback comes from fatigue? People feeling like they're constantly being told society is broken. Reese looks at her. If society is partially broken, fatigue doesn't fix it. The audience claps again. Alyssa's voice tightens slightly for the first time, but neither does framing it in a way that alienates half the country. Reese responds, calm but firm. I don't believe equity alienates people. Alyssa counters, the messaging around it can. Sunny sighs softly. We're back to tone. Reese nods, because tone is often used to police content. The audience reacts loudly at that line. Alyssa raises her eyebrows. Or tone is part of persuasion. Reese's response is immediate. Women are tired of persuading for their humanity. The audience erupts in applause, the loudest yet. Alyssa stays composed, but her expression shifts. No one is debating humanity. Reese responds, access to opportunity is part of humanity. There's a collective inhale in the room. Whoopi steps in again, more firmly this time. Okay, I think what we're seeing here is two philosophies on how change happens. She looks at Alyssa. You're saying tone and unity first. She looks at Reese. You're saying truth and pressure first. Both nod, reluctantly acknowledging the summary. But the tension hasn't dissipated. It's sharper now. Not heated shouting, but ideological steel meeting ideological steel. And the audience can feel it. Because this isn't about one movie or one studio. It's about how you define progress. And whether calling out flaws strengthens a country or weakens it. The camera lingers just a second longer than usual before the segment transitions. No one's backing down. And there's still one final stretch left. When the show returns for the final segment, the applause is strong, but there's a different energy now. It's not just excitement. It's anticipation. The audience knows they've witnessed something more layered than the typical celebrity promo. Whoopi looks around the table before speaking. All right, final thoughts. Because clearly we could do this for another hour. Light laughter from the crowd. Reese smiles, but she looks reflective now. Not defensive. Not heated. Just steady. Alyssa sits composed, though her posture is firm, hands folded on the table. Whoopi turns to Reese first. If there's one thing you want people watching at home to take from this conversation, what is it? Reese takes a breath. I think progress requires honesty. And honesty isn't always comfortable. But discomfort doesn't mean division. It means we're paying attention. Applause rolls through the audience. She continues, more personal now. I love this country. I've built my entire life here. My company exists because of opportunities one had. But loving something means wanting it to be better. It means noticing where we can improve. That's not criticism for the sake of it. It's investment. That earns a strong wave of applause. Whoopi nods slowly. All right. She turns to Alyssa. Your final thought? Alyssa nods once before speaking. I agree that loving something means wanting it to improve. Where I differ is how we talk about it. I think language shapes culture. And if we describe our institutions as fundamentally unjust, we risk eroding trust in them. There's a mix of murmurs and light applause. She continues, calm but firm. I believe America has made extraordinary progress for women. Not perfect progress, but extraordinary. And I don't want young girls growing up thinking the deck is stacked beyond hope. I want them to see possibility. The audience reacts, some clapping, some quiet. Reese responds gently this time, not combative. I don't think acknowledging barriers erases possibility. I think it equips people to navigate it. Alyssa nods. And I think emphasizing possibility empowers people to overcome barriers. There's a pause. Whoopi looks at both of them. Well, that's the table. The audience laughs softly. Joy jumps in. You know what? This is what grown-up disagreement looks like. Applause. Sunny adds, and it's important, because people at home are having these conversations too. Whoopi leans back slightly. Nobody flipped a table. Nobody stormed off. That's progress. More laughter. Reese turns slightly toward Alyssa. I appreciate the conversation. Alyssa nods. Same. It's polite, but real. Neither woman has conceded. Neither has escalated. The tension didn't explode. It sharpened and settled into something firm. Whoopi wraps it up. Reese Witherspoon, everybody. The audience stands for a partial standing ovation. Not thunderous, but strong. Respectful. As the cameras pull back and the theme music begins to rise, you can see small clusters in the audience already whispering. People are gesturing, reacting, debating in real time. And when the show officially cuts to commercial, the real ripple begins. Because within minutes, clips from the exchange start circulating online. Short snippets hit social media first. Unity built on silence isn't unity. Women are tired of persuading for their humanity. Language shapes culture. Those quotes begin trending almost immediately. On X, hashtags split in two directions. Some praise Reese for refusing to soften her stance. Others applaud Alyssa for pushing back on what they call Hollywood absolutism. Comment sections fill fast. One user writes, "This is how you debate without screaming." Another posts, "Reese completely shut her down." Another counters, "Alyssa asked the questions nobody else would." Clips rack up hundreds of thousands of views within hours. Cable news panels pick it up that evening. Not as a scandal, but as a cultural moment. Daytime debate goes viral. Hollywood activism meets political pushback. By the next morning, morning radio shows are replaying segments. Opinion columns pop up online analyzing the exchange, some framing it as a clash of worldviews, others as an example of productive disagreement. Behind the scenes, sources close to the show say there was no blow-up backstage. No yelling. No drama in the dressing rooms. Reese reportedly thanked the producers before leaving. Alyssa was seen chatting with staff, calm as ever. But both camps knew something significant had happened. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't chaotic. It was controlled tension, the kind that lingers. On Instagram, Reese posts a photo later that evening promoting her latest project. The caption doesn't mention the debate, but the comments are flooded with references to the show. "Thank you for standing firm. You handled that with grace." Meanwhile, Alyssa posts a clip of her final remarks with the caption, "We can disagree and still respect each other." That post trends too. And that's what makes moments like this resonate. No walk-offs. No shouting matches. Just two different philosophies on change, meeting in real time on live television. Some viewers say Reese won. Some say Alyssa held her ground. Others say the audience won because they got to see disagreement without collapse. And that's rare. The ratings for that episode spike slightly compared to the week's average. Not dramatically, but noticeably. Because people share it. They replay it. They argue about it at dinner tables. They send clips in group chats. And days later, it's still circulating. Not because it was scandalous, but because it felt real. And that's what keeps talk shows alive. The unpredictable, unscripted tension when perspectives collide and neither side retreats. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think Reese was right to prioritize calling out systemic barriers directly? Or do you think Alyssa made a strong point about tone and unity? Was this productive debate, or just another example of cultural divide playing out on television? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the Star Talks for more real talk show stories.